Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's press conference, the first of the season. The Citadel will open the season this Saturday right here at Johnson-Haygood Stadium at 3 o'clock against number 11 Towson. It's the second straight year the Tigers and Bulldogs will play. Here to talk about his team and the upcoming season and everything they've gone through in camp so far is head coach Brent Thompson.
Thanks, John. Number one is it's been a good camp. I think we've had all the elements here at camp. We've had some fairly cooler weather to begin with, which was nice. Then we had a little bit of hotter weather there. It got really extremely hot there for about 2 to 5 practice days out there where we got a little bit acclimated to the heat. And then we got a few days of rain, and we actually were able to play in all of those different conditions, which may not just help you out for the beginning, but it also could help you out at the end of the season too when you may see some rain games. So I thought that was important for us. We've had a good camp. The one thing that we were really focused on in camp was probably our defense more than anything else. Our offense is going to remain fairly similar. We're always going to change a little portion of it and adapt it to the quarterback and adapt it to the skill that we have. But the defense was the major change. We had a lot of additions that were factor in that we didn't have in the spring. We also got a little bit more time to work with them than we did in the spring. So Coach Grantham was able to install his whole and entire defense, which was nice. It's a very multiple defense. It's a very pressure-oriented defense. We can get into a lot of different looks. We can have a lot of different personnel out there, which is what I like. I think he's going to be able to utilize more of our personnel in different situations. That's going to help us out, not just this week, but also throughout the year. So that's important for us. Offensively, we're returning the majority of our offensive depth chart. We do have a couple of new guys that are moving in a little bit. The left guard position is either going to be John Barrett-Lewis or Jonathan Toole. That'll be probably decided at the end of the week. Other than that, the A-backs will be as they were at the end of last year for the most part. Wide receivers will be the same as they were last year with McCarthy and Raleigh Webb out there. Of course, Branden Rainey will be the starter at quarterback. And then Clay Harris and Amike Nwanze at the B-back spot. So I think we're pretty solid on that side of the ball. And the specialists, I think all those are pretty good shape. Pat Keefe will be the returning long snapper and short snapper for us. Jacob Godak will be the place kicker for us, and Matt Campbell will be the starting punter for us. So those are all pretty much set. All guys are pretty much healthy. We've got a couple of positions out there that have just got a little bit of depth that we're going to work back here probably the next week. I don't foresee anybody being out for this game or not being at least available in an emergency situation for us for this game. Brian Murdaugh will be the backup quarterback this week, just as a footnote on the offensive side. But other than that, I think this is a good starter for us. This is a playoff team, and it should be a playoff team this year again. They return about 13, I believe, 7 on the defensive side and 6 on the offensive side. And I think it depends on how you include the offensive side. There may be 1 or 2 more guys on there that could be included as starters. They include the top 2 wide receivers, and, of course, Flacco returns as the starting quarterback. They've got at least 1 or 2 replacements on the offensive line. But I think for the most part, this is a very, very good veteran football team. They returned 2 really good players on the defense, and the Mike linebacker, who is a Savannah product of Robert Haywood, is a very good player. Their outside linebacker, number 12, and then the other outside linebacker all had quite a few tackles against us last year. So we've got our eye on those guys. Those guys are going to be guys that we need to keep aware of and make sure that they get controlled a little bit by the offense. Now, other than that, I think this will be a good test for us about where we are as a program. I think this is one of those games that we're going to decide is where are we going to go from here. We're going to rise up to it if we play a good football game and play our style of football. We know that we'll be a contender, especially in the first 2 weeks. We got 2 of what could possibly be the top conference teams in the country there in the Colonial League. I think this is a good test for us, and we'll figure out exactly where we are and how good a football team we can be. The one thing that we noticed just in watching the Sanford-Youngstown State game as well as the Florida-Miami game, and that is just the sloppy play, is if you have sloppy play, you will not win very many football games. So early on, we've got to focus on containing, controlling, and being able to make tackles when we need to, which is the number one thing that we need to do, is get them on the ground, have an opportunity to reserve the right to punt the ball or kick the ball in a field goal situation or go for it on 4th down. Those are things that we've got to consider. We don't want to turn the football over, and we certainly don't want to have any penalties, which is what really inevitably got Miami and inevitably almost got Florida, but definitely got Sanford last week. I think those things are key fundamentals in the first early weeks in the season. Questions?
Talking about sloppy play a little bit, I know at the beginning of camp you wanted to put a focus on ball control. How did that progress through the end of camp?
At the beginning, it was about where we thought it was going to be. It was not very good. We didn't have very good ball control, and our defense forced a lot of turnovers, which was nice. It got better as camp went on. The second scrimmage was a rainy, messy scrimmage, but I think in the last couple of controlled scrimmages that we've had out there in live situations, we got a lot better with it. And it's a little bit different out there when you're not mixing and matching so many different bodies out there, and you've got more of your top 3 to 4 running backs running the football, and you've got your top quarterback center exchange. Those are different scenarios in there, but the number one thing will be penalties. Is if you can stay off the penalty board, you'll be okay. And for us, those are going to be drive killers. And if we don't control that, we're going to have a hard time winning the football game.
Coach, you talked about Towson's offense and all the weapons that they have, but you guys boast a great running back core. You averaged 300-plus yards a game last year. How important is it going to be able to establish the run and maintain clock time against Towson?
So we got behind. We got behind by 2 touchdowns last year, and we ended up having to throw a little bit more than we probably would have in a normal game. We did rush for over 300 yards against them last year, which I thought was a good outing for us. However, it didn't make up a whole lot as far as we're having to score 2 or 3 touchdowns in the second half, which is not going to be to our benefit. So the running game, it needs to happen early on for us. We can't hunt and peck around too much. We've got to constantly get first downs. And really, we know we're probably not going to rip off the big ones like we did against them last year. We're going to have to find a way to be able to constantly move the chains, control the clock a little bit, wear on the defense as best that we possibly can. If we can do that, we'll have some success out there. But if we're putting the ball back into Flacco's hands, it's going to be a long day for us.
Coach, where have you seen the most growth in Branden through this offseason since he really didn't start till the end of last year?
Probably mostly in understanding of the offense. He knows where the checks are. He knows what to stay out of. He knows what plays to get us back into. His leadership has always been there. Even immediately when he took over, the players on the offensive side gravitated to him. So that was one thing that came fairly easy to him and really grew over the next couple of months. But really the learning of the offense and the understanding of the offense certainly has helped him out. He's done a lot better job, and we've emphasized his strength in the passing game, which is what he needed to do. We do have some pretty good weapons out there at wide receiver that we need to find a way to utilize, get the ball in their hands, and at least make a vertical threat.
Coach, there's some similarities to the rosters, but how much can you draw on the Towson game from last year going up there to Maryland, and how much can that come into play here as you start a season fresh when you don't have tape on what a team looks like?
Well, they have a new defense coordinator. We have a new defensive coordinator. It's a little bit of speculation there. But the personnel is about the same, and I thought they did a good job of defending us last year, and certainly they did a good job offensive, taking what was given to them, and that was Flacco being able to account for about 73% of their offense, which was about 600 yards. If you can limit that, I think we'll have a pretty good chance of being able to win the football game. But when you watch these guys on film, they're very talented. The wide receivers are fairly legitimate players. They're top 2 wide receivers. The running back is a good football player there. They are big up front. They're big on the offensive line. They are going to always find a way to move the football. What we've got to do is make them drive the football more than anything else. Last year they had plays or drives of about 6 and 4 and 7 and 8. That's not going to fare too well for us. For us, we need them to force the ball all the way in the red zone and try to make them score in the red zone.
Coach, when you put on the tape of last year's game, what frustrates you the most about what Flacco was able to do against you guys?
Well, I don't know that we had all that great of a plan for him at times, and really what ended up happening was I thought we did a pretty good job of covering the threats down the field. Unfortunately, when you cover the threats down the field, you leave something open on the inside there, and he caught us a little bit in man and man-free coverage. And when that happens, a lot of the backs are turned, and he can go untouched for about 15 to 20 yards. Sometimes we even try to put a spy on him at times. It just didn't work out well for us. He's very athletic. He's a baseball player. He's a football player. He's a jack of all trades, can do it all. You need to force him to sit him in the pocket and try to make him throw the football down the field a little bit. So that's our challenge this year, is to make sure that we don't give him those free runs and you don't go 15, 20 yards without being touched.
Just looking at the depth chart here, it's Jonathan Toole, who must have had a really good camp.
Jonathan did, and he's competed hard for that spot right there. He came on a lot for us last year, and then really didn't have as great of a spring as we thought he was going to have. So he was a little bit buried on the depth chart going into this year, but really had a really nice fall camp, and he's done a good job. So that's going to be a little bit of a battle to the end, I think.
And you have a couple of new tight ends. How often do you see using the tight end, and what do you use those guys for?
Well, they're essentially extra tackles for us. But this year we actually have a young man that played tight end a little bit, played mostly in high school at tight end. We've kind of worked him there since the spring. And Eli Lowe, he'll be the first kind of time that we've really seen him out there. He ran down on kickoffs a couple of times last year. But to be honest with you, he's a young man that's got a lot of will, want, and desire to be out there. So we're going to find ways to get him out there. The other thing is it's going to take a little bit of pressure off the wide receivers. Is when you've got really two good, solid wide receivers there, you don't want to make them stay out there all day long. So you're going to have a third guy to at least rotate in there. It allows you to get into some more different sets, different personnel groupings, different formations, which I always talk about. Maybe the different 20% of our offense may be in formations this year.
So if the situation arose where Rainey had to come out, would it be Murdaugh or Ryan McCarthy? Or
It would be Murdaugh right now. Ryan is available as our emergency quarterback. We've got him probably schooled up enough to handle about 20 to 30% of the offense right now, but Murdaugh's got the full run of the offense.
And finally, who are some true freshmen that we might see Saturday? I know there's a couple guys maybe on defense that might get in the game.
Yeah, we've got a couple in different packages. Logan Brought's a little bit. He's at the linebacker spot. We've got a package set for him. You may see in the secondary-wise, I think we're about set there as far as the depth of those guys are concerned. You may see Andy Davis possibly in there. He's probably in the rotation a little bit back there. Up front guys, you're going to see probably Dewey Green for sure at some point in there. You may see Jay Smith as a redshirt freshman in there a little bit. He's out of West Ashley, a local guy for us. So I think those are some freshmen, some redshirt freshmen for us in there that you may see.
Coach, getting to start the season at home this year, what is the biggest advantage for y'all other than just the comfortability of being in your own place?
Well, number one is certainly not having to make a 9-hour drive to Towson. That certainly helps us out this year. But really, with school starting this week, it can be a very congested week for us. We start on Wednesday, so camp laid out very nicely for us. We had 3 solid weeks of camp before school started. We technically started game week this week. So not having to travel this week certainly helps us out because what you do is you end up just throwing another wrench in that schedule there, having to leave on a Friday, or if we were going up there, we'd leave on a Thursday night. So I think starting off at home helps us out. Obviously, starting off in August in Charleston helps us out. We've practiced in this weather. If we get a little bit of humidity out there, that could work to our advantage a little bit. And certainly being at home, as we haven't played as many home games as we'd like to in the last 3 years. Certainly getting one of those down right away would be nice.
Coach, everyone loves a week 1 upset. What would it mean if you could be able to knock off a ranked team like Towson here on your home turf, and what kind of message would that send to the league and everybody else in college football?
Well, certainly after the 7th place pick in the conference poll, I think that would certainly send a message to the rest of the conference, and it would certainly upset that top 25 poll, which at this point probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense anyway. But the top, I would say 10 or 15 are pretty solid in there, and this is a top 25 team. I know they're ranked somewhere 11th in their poll, and being that they were a playoff team last year and a 7-win Colonial League team certainly deserves to be in the top 25 this year. And they've returned plenty of players there. So it would send a huge message to everybody that Citadel football is back where we were, and I think we can be back where we were. But we still got to play our kind of game. And if we don't, we won't have any chance of any sort of upset.
Coach mentioned some of the sloppy play that's been going on in week 0. What do you enforce as you're talking with the players about that? You mentioned it, but what are the things you're really stressing in those moments when you see something on TV?
Number one is penalties. Penalties are drive killers on the offensive side. Turnovers, we work every day on turnovers, both sides of the football. If we can create them, that'd be great. If we don't give them, well, that's even better. I think we've got a chance. Last year, this game was a 1 turnover game. We threw the ball, interception on our side of the 50 right there, and that hurt us. Other than that, we didn't have any other certainly 1 turnover is too many for us in this type of a ball game. If you want to pull an upset, you can't do that, and you can't have any certain amount of things right there. You take a look at the Youngstown game, and Youngstown really did everything they could to make sure that they controlled the football. They didn't make any huge mistakes. I think the special team there, the snap got away from the kicker, and we talked about that as far as the specialist battery goes. So that's a little bit of a concern. There are things that you can't always control, but certainly the turnovers as far as the offense is concerned is going to be huge. So we've got to protect the football. We've got to reserve the right to punt and kick the field goal and be able to play field position.
Ask you depth charts. Georgia Tech put out a depth chart, I think, this week that just lists all the players in alphabetical order. You can't tell who's starting, and played games with depth charts in the past. As a coach, what do you learn from a depth chart when you get hold of the opponent's depth chart? Do you study that?
You know, I don't put a whole lot of faith in them. I put more faith in what I see on them, and that's where Georgia Tech has a little bit of an advantage because they don't know exactly what they're going to do out there because it is a completely new staff out there. So they don't know how to place guys out there, and so when you list them alphabetically right there, there's a little bit of gamesmanship out there. Certainly, I don't know. That stuff kind of catches up with you. We try to list our guys as best we can out there. Sometimes there's always an or in some spots there, but for the most part, it's my 11 versus your 11 out there, and what we'll find out on game day. I don't put a whole lot of faith into what I see on this thing. What I am concerned about is where they are more than who they are, because a lot of times I can't control where they go. The defensive coordinator controls where they go. I try to influence how they react, and that's how you make your play calls in that. As far as the offensive depth chart's concerned on their end, they're talented no matter how you cut it. You can put guys in different spots out there, but we know at the end of the day that their top two returners are back at the wide receiver spot. They're back. They list a fullback, but they don't have a whole lot of fullback packages in there. Their tight end's a pretty good playmaker for them, and they've got about 2 new guys on the offensive line. So, you try to do all that research through the media. You try to do all that research through message boards, and you find out who's actually out there on the football field during this time of year. Is the best you can do until you can get at least 1 or 2 games under your belt and you can watch the video.
Coach, what's the last thing you're going to tell your team before taking the field on Saturday?
Have fun and enjoy it as I always do. We don't have many home opportunities. This is a great environment to play. The number one thing is you work just so hard. We work 90% of the year to get about 10% of play fun for you. Then I don't know what we're doing out there, number one. Number two is that there's nothing that you haven't seen out there. There's nothing that they can do to you. You control your own destiny out there. That you can do that is control the ball game we've lost. Thank you guys coming out.
This year we will have food available for